Mateo began training and taming the new mules. He spent long hours in the paddock approaching them with patience, speaking to them in a soft voice, observing every reaction to learn how to earn their trust. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months of hard work under the sun and the rain. Many times he ended up exhausted, with wounded hands and a worn-out body, but his spirit never broke. Little by little, those animals that at first looked at him with suspicion began to accept his presence, until they recognized in him not a stranger, but a companion worthy of respect. But one day, while he was trying to tame the fiercest one, the animal threw him violently. Mateo fell to the ground and his leg broke. The pain was unbearable, and as if misfortune attracted poisonous tongues, some villagers passing by Don Elias's farm witnessed the scene. They were the same ones who had laughed at him when he lost his mule. And now they murmured with cruelty again. "See? Those mules brought nothing but misfortune. Now his son is injured." Mateo gritted his teeth as thick tears rolled down his face. "Father, don't tell me this isn't bad now. Look what happened to me," he said between sobs. Don Elías came to his side in silence, knelt on the ground, and held his leg firmly. His gaze did not tremble. With a low voice that seemed to wrap around the pain, he answered, "Son, don't call it bad yet. Time has mysterious ways of showing us its truth." At that very moment the criticisms began, like arrows fired straight at Don Elías's heart. "And now what, Elías? Where is that purpose you talked about when you lost your mule? Look at yourself, your son lying broken on the ground. What kind of blessing is this?" Don Elías looked at them unshaken, with the serenity of someone who does not need to defend himself against the noise of the world. His voice was firm but filled with peace. Purpose is not always understood in the moment, and pain does not mean the absence of God. Don't call misfortune something that hasn't finished revealing itself. Time will show whether this is a loss or a lesson. Don Elías did not argue with anyone. He tore a strip from a sack, improvised a splint with two straight branches, and while Mateo gasped, he immobilized his leg carefully and whispered, "Do not curse pain. Sometimes it is a demanding teacher. If God allowed it, He will also give us the strength to endure it." Mateo looked at him with eyes burning with anguish. "And what if I can't work again, Father?" "Of course you will work again, son. Sometimes God stops us to teach us to walk in a different way. Today you don't understand, but don't rush your judgment. Be grateful for life even when it hurts. Leave the rest in the hands of the Almighty." The wind swept across the paddock like an ancient hand. The mules in the distance watched in silence, and amid the pain, Don Elías's voice floated like a promise that needed no proof. The truth of that day was still incomplete. Only 2 weeks after Mateo's accident, the country entered into war. The government began recruiting all the young men to take them to the front lines. No one could escape. When the soldiers reached the village, they went from farm to farm taking the youth. When they arrived at Don Elías's home, they saw Mateo with his broken leg. They could not take him. Meanwhile, many of the other young men were torn away from their homes, and sadly, most would never return. Families cried inconsolably. The air of the village filled with laments, like a river of pain without a channel. Mothers held the empty clothes of their sons. Fathers stared into the horizon with dim eyes, unable to accept the loss. The sound of sobbing mixed with the silence of the empty houses, which seemed to scream the absence of those who would never return. Those who once mocked Don Elías now looked at him with different eyes. The same army that tore their sons from their arms could not take Mateo because his broken leg kept him home. And it was then that they understood what they had once despised. The trial of Don Elías and his son, which seemed like misfortune, had actually turned out for good. Amid the laments, they said with broken voices, "We judged him. We laughed at his misfortune, but look now. His son lives while ours are gone, and we don't know if they will ever return." Their words were true. Everything that happens is permitted by the Creator, even if it seems unfair in the moment. The silence that followed was not mockery, but respect. Many understood that the faith of that humble farmer had seen farther than their hasty judgments, and that what seemed like loss was actually protection. Don Elías, with calm eyes and a firm voice, looked at Mateo and said, "Do you see, son? What seemed like misfortune ended up becoming salvation. Losing Moro was hard, but he returned with more. Breaking your leg hurt, but it saved you from the war. That is life. We never know what each thing truly means until time reveals it." Mateo, with tears pooling in his eyes, replied with a knot in his throat, "Father, now I understand. I complained the day the mule threw me to the ground and broke my leg. I thought everything was over for me, but if it hadn't been for that pain, I wouldn't be here with you today. My friends were taken, and many won't return." Don Elías placed a hand on his son's shoulder and continued with tenderness, yet with a strength that sank deep into the soul. "Son, that is why I told you not to call something bad before it reveals itself. The Creator writes with lines we cannot understand at first. He sees farther than our eyes and knows more than our hearts can bear. Everything He allows with a purpose." Mateo lowered his head, moved, and said softly, "Forgive me, Father. I doubted your words, I doubted your faith, but now I see you were right. God never abandoned us. He was guiding us along a path I did not understand." Don Elías hugged him tightly, and, with contained tears, whispered into his son's ear, "Never forget this, Mateo. Life is not measured by what we have or lose, but by the trust we place in the Creator. What hurts today may save you tomorrow. What seems like a blessing today may test you tomorrow. That is why you must be grateful at all times, because everything has a purpose." In that moment, the silence of the fields became solemn. The wind caressed the branches of the trees, as if confirming those eternal words. And in Mateo's heart, a new faith was born, a faith that no longer depended on what he saw, but on what he was learning to trust. I am very glad you made it to the end of this video. If this story left you with a lesson, subscribe so you don't miss more life-changing stories. Thank you. See you in the next one.